Thank you all. It's great to have you all here today. It's, you know what I'm saying? If you can, maybe guys, if you can move over a bit there so we get more people into the room. Yeah, you're going to have to stand. Yeah, okay. Sorry. We are trying to get a bigger space. Okay, so let's... Let's go on, because until now, we have used our method of analysis, which is structure proper, paralleling to the input processing and output phase. We've used it for Mishnah. We've used it for Gemara. We've used it for Rashi and the commentators, called the Mefarshim. And now we're going to use it for Tosafot. So as we mentioned previously, Tosafot is not the same as other Rishonim. Tosafot is the category, the genre of what's called the Makshim. The Makshim are those that their goal is to sort out problems in the sugya. Their goal isn't to fill in the missing pieces, not to complete unfinished sentences. Their goal is to look at the sugya with an analytical eye and saying, does this make sense in its own right? And does this make sense with everything else in Shas? So in order to learn Tosafot, we need a strategy of approach, because when we start to see the actual structure of Tosafot, it's way more similar to a Gemara than it is to a commentator. In fact, very often, Tosafot will be an extrapolation or an extension of the Gemara itself. Of course, like all Rishonim, we have to be loyal to the first 4 stages, which are always geography, locating in the flow of the Gemara where exactly this particular commentator begins. Girsa, checking the text and matching up the bold print of the Tosafot to the text of the Gemara, making sure that they are totally identical, otherwise he's commenting on a different Gemara. And then you do read and translate, divide and conquer. Now, when we speak about the dividing and conquering of Tosafot, it is going to be very different from Rashi, because Tosafot is structured not as an ongoing series of comments, but as an internal debate. Generally, Tosafot will begin with a difficulty. It will have a kasha, raising a difficulty with either internally or externally. Then Tosafot will move on to a resolution, often assisted by a proof. Those are really the 3 primary working pieces in the Tosafot, and we're going to figure out how we're going to unpack them in a methodical fashion. So once you've done geography, you've geographically located where exactly this commentator is, making a note of that, because the commentator, even Tosafot, is not ET, but IT, and IT stands for intra-textual. ET, extra textual, doesn't work. If there would be an ET in front of me, I would simply, boom, shoot him with a gun. Then, once we've made sure that we've made that connection, because it's crucial, because you're going to be weaving the Mefarshim back into the text, weaving them like a tapestry into the unfinished work of the Gemara. So then you have to figure out, well, is the Gemara that they have exactly the same as ours? Then you have to do a thorough reading and translating. Remember, this is your input stage. If your reading and translating is corrupted and you don't understand the parts and the whole, which we're going to come to in dividing and conquering, if these 2, reading and translation and dividing and conquering, are not done efficiently, all your thinking thereafter will be corrupted. It will be like going for a very long walk on a very short pier. You land up drowning in the waters of vagueness. And therefore you have to make sure that you fastidiously keep to the first 4 parts of Tosafot and all Rishonim, because this assures that your input is going to be faithful and powerful. Once you have done that, then because Tosafot, generally speaking, focuses around raising difficulties, you have to do, like we did in the Gemara, you have to do crosshairs. Whenever there's a kasha, you have to identify who is the laughing man in the crosshairs of the kasha. And when you find him, you have to make a specific note of recognizing, acknowledging, and making sure you get him. Just want to make sure that those payers are fully articulated. Next, what was the premise of Tosafot, as we saw in the Gemara as well, and what happens in the resolution, how does it shift? And finally, substitution. Substitution is really the integration of the new understanding back into the text of Tosafot. So substitution, the language or the body movement for substitution is, you familiar with that? Yes? Demonstrating that you have to take the player that's been not performing well for whatever reason. He may be wounded, injured, move him out, replace him with someone else. That's called substitution. So once you've done geography, Girsa, read and translated, divided and conquered, you've located who is in the crosshairs of the kasha. You've figured out what was Tosafot thinking in order that the kasha is a kasha. You've seen the resolution and shown, oh, this is how he thought differently. Then you go and you put it back into the actual text of the Gemara, because, as you well know, the commentators are IT, not ET. Comprendos? Excellent. I'd like to, with your permission, visit a Tosafot on Daf Chaf Zayin Amud Beis, which addresses the very first kasha that the Gemara asks on our Mishnah. The Tosafot, the second Tosafot on the page, Tosafot always occurs on the outside of the Gemara, furthest away from the spine of the Gemara. And Tosafot can be spotted by the bold print, which are not written in Rashi script, but in normal Hebrew capitalization. And Tosafot begins with the words, Amai Potter Iboile Liyune. Says Tosafot, Amai Potter Iboile Liyune. What am I going to do first? I'm going to take this finger and I'm going to geographically locate where Tosafot is in the Gemara. I found it. It's in the very first kasha. After the Gemara has quoted the Mishnah and has told me that when someone comes and they stumble over and they break an object, they're exempt, the Gemara then attacks and says, well, but why are they exempt? They should be liable because a person is incumbent to look, it's incumbent on the person to look where he goes, and therefore he should have spotted that kad in that Rishus HaRabim. Why did he stumble over and fall? It's his own fault, and therefore he has to pay reparations for the damages. Amai potri boilei lunemezel. And let's just now compare the Girsa in part 2. Amai potri boilei liyune. It says Agumar, Amai potri boilei liyune. It seems to be identical. The fact that Tosafot doesn't include the word u-mezal in his bold print may suggest that he didn't have that in his text. It's not proven, but it's probable, because the truth is the sentence can work without the extra word of mezal, and maybe in Tosafot's text it didn't exist, because it's strange to me that Tosafot would quote the entire phrase and then leave out the last word. but no proof, and I don't even know if there's a difference. Just pointing out this idea of Girsa, part 2 of the 7 wonders of Tosafot. Part 3, let's read and translate. My potter, why is he exempt? He is incumbent upon him to look where he's going. Normally, if you'd be doing this yourself, you'd be doing this 4 times in a loud and clearly enunciated voice. But since we are doing this as a shiur, I'm going to not afford you that luxury, and we'll just launch into it. My potter, says Tosafot, aval hach, but this, loy porich, he didn't ask. Open your quotation marks. Amai chayev, benizkoi, why is he liable with the damages of the person who hurt himself, perhaps on the shards of the broken vessel? Amai chayev benizkoi, kishihuzak, iboile liyune, close inverted commas. Says Tosafot, aval hach loy parich, open inverted commas. But this kasha, the Gemara did not ask. And what was the kasha the Gemara did not ask? It was the following kasha. The Gemara didn't ask the kasha, amai chayev benizkoi kishihuzak, why is the owner of the vessel liable to pay for the damages of the damaged stumbler? The stumbler should have looked where he was going. As I explained above, the yoser, that more yesh there is loy to him, he has to be more lishmor, to God, shelo yazik, that he shouldn't cause damages to others. Yazik means to cause damages to others. Mi shelo, from that he shouldn't yuzak, get damaged himself. We'll stop there and we'll deconstruct Tosafot and figure out the parts, which is number 4 of Tosafot. So that's a translation. Translation is accurate. Translation makes sure that we're not skipping words, we're not offering vagaries as alternatives to translation. And now we can go back and do a bit of comprehension. What you may find is, as you're reading through the Tosafot, your brain's probably processing stuff, and you probably think, oh, 1 second. And then you have to learn what's called the art of restraint of impulsivity. Because, especially today, we're conditioned to be easily distracted. The whole way our interaction with media is designed is to, whilst we're focusing on one thing, there should be a hook to something else, which we then get led into and hooked on, and then there's a hook to something else, which then hooks us to something else. And that is why there are people in the room, like that guy far in the back. I know your name. And I know what you're doing last night for 2.5 hours, don't I? Yes. You were doom scrolling, weren't you? And that's why you look so groggy today. And I don't blame you, because as you all know, there are 2 people who are called users. People who have a struggle with addictions, and people who buy smartphones. And in both contexts, the goal is to keep a person locked up in a web, unable to wrestle out of the spider web-like fiber that surround and keep us trapped, much like the fly, which is a spider's prey. And therefore, we have to fight this thing called impulsivity. Impulsivity is whatever pops into mind, I go there. In the Eastern tradition, they call this the dog's mind. Because what a dog, when it smells a trail, does is it gets totally focused and it gets pulled away, far away from where it's meant to go, based on the trail that it just follows and follows and follows. And we have to restrain that and gain mental self-mastery. And the way we do that is by restraining the impulsive push, the impulsive pull, the impulsive jerk. It's not a person. And sit in the point that we're pondering and understand it. And therefore, when we're analyzing a Tosafot or any Gemara, we have to make sure that when we're translating, even though we may be distracted by questions that pop into our mind, put them on hold. First of all, build the foundation of the text, and then and only then you can explore them. So let's go through the structure of the text. Tosafot begins on my pottery boy le'elune. Why is he exempt? He should really look where he's going. Says Tosafot, aval bat hach loy parich. This the Gemara did not ask. What didn't the Gemara ask? The Gemara didn't ask, why is he liable? The Gemara could have asked. I don't understand, could the Gemara have asked? Why in the latter part of the Mishnah does it say that the owner of the jug is liable to pay for the damages done by the person who broke it? If the person broke it and subsequently got hurt, either by his force of contact with the jug or by lacerating his sole of his foot because the shards were sharp and penetrating, the owner of the jug is liable to pay for that. Why is he liable to pay for it? The person should have looked where he was going, and that should exempt the owner who placed it there from payment. Just like you ask in the very beginning of the Gemara, why is he exempt for breaking it? He should look where he's going. Use that same reasoning to exempt the owner of the jug from paying the damages that he sustained. And that is part one of Tosafot. And that is a implicit kasha. Part one. Part two. Kedeperishti la'el. Tosafot says, this is not a new thing, a new idea, but I explained it above 4 daf ago, on daf Chof Gimel Amud Aleph Divrei Maschil U'Lechayev. If you want to refer yourself back to the Tosafot, it's quoted there in brackets. Tosafot, I already explained this principle of why it's only a kasha. It's only difficult on the ratio of the first part of the Mishnah, but on the second part of the Mishnah, there is no problem whatsoever. And the reason is, the yoise yesh loi lishmor, because a person is more required, it's more upon him to guard shelo yazik mi she lo yuzak. It's much more incumbent on a person to make sure he doesn't cause damage to others than that he doesn't get damaged himself. Which means as follows. Part one of Tosafot is a kasha, implicit, and part two of Tosafot is a teretz, a resolution. So Tosafot has got 2 parts: problem, sets up a difficulty, and he resolves it. And his difficulty is, why are you only asking Gemara on the first part of the Mishnah as to why the person is exempt when he breaks it? He should be liable because he should look where he's going. You should also ask, or maybe only ask, not clear in Tosafot, but you should certainly, it's also a difficulty with the latter part of the Mishnah. The latter part of the Mishnah says that when the person damages himself, the owner of the jug is liable. Why is the owner of the jug liable? Why is he liable? You should look where he's going. He caused the damage himself. Had he been more alert, and you need to be alert, don't you, Zechariah? Why is that, Zechariah?
So we can process everything that we're presented with.
And also because your country needs alerts. Thank you. So, when you're being alert, surely all alerts are equal. Meaning, just like I have to be alert to make sure I don't break something else, that same alertness should stop me from getting damaged. And therefore, if I'm meant to be alert, so there's two seeming consequences. Number one, I will be held fully responsible for damage caused. Number two, if I get damaged, it's not his problem, it's my problem. And therefore, says Tosafot, the kasha that the Gemara asks essentially is as relevant to the latter part of the Mishnah as to the former part. Difficulty. Resolution, says Tosafot. No, it's different. It's actually different. That not all alerts are equal. As we constantly say, some alerts are more equal than others. And the alert to be able to guard yourself from causing damage to others is a heightened level of awareness that's incumbent upon you. Yet, the alertness required to stop yourself from being damaged is a lower level of awareness. And therefore, you're walking down the street and there's paradoxically two legal factors that influence your awareness. If it's to cause others damage, super hyper aware. If it's to be damaged yourself, you can kind of just have a very basic low level alertness. And therefore, says Tosafot, there was never a problem with the latter part of the Mishnah. In the latter part of the Mishnah, the fact that you don't have to look where you're going in order to cause others damage is totally coherent with the fact, but if you get hurt, he'll pay for you. Because this is a radical idea, isn't it? It's a radical idea which I believe embodies so much about the nature of interpersonal relationships in our Jewish spiritual system. It's so outward focused, isn't it? It's so outward focused because instead of it placing an unrelenting onus, regardless of consequences, hurting yourself or hurting others, on the person walking down the street, it says, well, it depends on your focus. And there's two areas of focus. There's focus on other and focus on self. What should I be more considerate of? Default, unmediated, unevolved spiritual being, walking down the street. Who do I care about whilst I walk down the street? Who do I care about? Me, the big me. And therefore, when I walk down the street, what am I concerned about? I've got to make sure that I don't get hurt. But what about other people? What about the damage that could be caused to them? Listen, they're idiots for putting the stuff there, and their fault. In other words, my intuitive, because until we do the work, we are pretty self-centered. Oh, I don't know about you, maybe not, but I've recognized I'm amazingly self-centered. And therefore, when I walk down the road, I think about me, and then also about the me, and then also a little bit about me and me. And therefore, in order for me to escape this narrow cage and to be able to expand myself into some level of outer awareness, even the basic legal principles have a very strong movement of self-emancipation. Get myself out of the narrow, selfish shell in which I exist. And when I walk down the road, what I should be super aware of is I'm making sure that I'm not going to hurt anyone or anything of anyone's. What happens if I get if I get hurt? Secondary. And therefore, Tosafot uses this rationale to explain why the Gemara has a difficulty with the first part of the Mishnah, but not with the second. The first part of the Mishnah says that when you're walking down the road and you stumble on something and you break it, you're exempt. Why are you exempt? You should look where you're going. But, what about the second part of the Mishnah? Why don't you ask, but why isn't the guy who put the stuff there liable? Why is he liable for your damages? You should look where you're going. No. You shouldn't look where you're going in order not to get hurt. That's about yourself. You don't have to be hyper aware for yourself. In fact, when it comes to you, so then it's interesting. Then the onus of obligation shifts. He has to be hyper aware not to cause you damage. So when you break his thing, You should have been more careful. When he breaks your thing, he should have been more careful. So therefore, it would be completely consistent for you to walk in the way the Gemara is addressing it. And according to the first three opinions, this will actually remain in conclusion. This understanding that when you're walking down the street and you break someone else's vessel, you'll be liable, because you should be aware. If it's broad daylight, it's not around the corner, it's not blockaded, it's not dark, you'll be liable. Why will you be liable? Because you look where you're going. At the same time, when you get hurt, he'll be liable. Why? Because he should be careful not to put his object in a way that could damage you. So therefore, it's completely consistent that when you break his thing, you're liable, and when he breaks your thing, by the same action, he's liable. Because the onus of responsibility gets heightened when it involves other people's damages, and it gets reduced when it involves your own. Magnificent. But until now, my dear friends, hi guys, it's amazing that you guys are still focused and you're standing up, well done. What we've done is we've done geography, we've done Girsa, we've read and translated, and we've divided and conquered. Now let's go through crosshairs, premise shift. Who is this kasha on? Who is Tosafot angling at with his rifle when he shoots this bullet of difficulty? It is none other than the makshan, excellent. The person in the Gemara that's asking the kasha on the Mishnah. He's saying, the person in the Gemara says to the Tana of the Mishnah, Tana! In his crosshairs, in the makshan, the one asking kasha in the Gemara, he's asking the Tana. He says, Tana! Why'd you say he's exempt? He should be liable. Says Tosafot, Gemara! Why are you asking the kasha on the first part of the Mishnah? Ask it on the second part of the Mishnah. It's also problematic there. That's also an issue. In other words, in the words of Tosafot, Aval hach loy parich amay chayav ben yizkoi. But this, he doesn't ask, why are you chayav ben yizkoi? Why is he liable for his damages? Kishehuzak, iboy leilunei. When he gets damaged, he should look where he's going. From the words of Tosafot, it's not clear to me if Tosafot means to say he should ask this instead of that, or he should ask this as well as that. Either way, in the crosshairs of Tosafot is the makshan of the Gemara. You haven't done a proper job in cross-examining the Mishnah, seemingly, because you only examined the first part either by implication or by deliberately asking the kasha on both. You should have addressed the problem in the Sefer as well. The Sefer also has a problem. Why are you neglecting the problem in the latter part of the Mishnah? The latter part of the Mishnah says that the person that put the jug there is liable to pay for damages. Why is he liable to pay? You should be looking where you're going. By implication, from the fact that you didn't ask the question, it's almost as if you're okay with that. Oh, the Reisha, that's the problem. But the Sefer is not a problem. Why not? It's the same problem. If you don't look where you're going, there's two consequences. You're liable for paying for what you damage, and he won't be liable for paying your damages. So why'd you ignore it? What's going on with you? What are you thinking? You being negligent in your job as a cross-examiner of the Mishnah? For crying out. With help. We need. Answers Tosafot. Was a deliberate move. Actually, it's not a problem with me, says the makshan back. No, he says, I asked the kasha because the only problem I have is with the first part of the Mishnah. Second part of the Mishnah, I'm completely at peace with. Second part of the Mishnah, the fact that he didn't look where he was going and he got damaged and I'm liable to pay for his clumsiness, that makes total sense. You see, because there's a principle, and the principle is that you have to be way more vigilant in order not to cause others damage than to cause yourself damage. And therefore it was perfectly okay with me, says the makshan back to Tosafot, virtually. It was perfectly okay for me to ask on the ratio because that makes sense. In other words, it makes sense, that doesn't make sense. But the Sefer I was completely at peace with, because you don't have to look where you're going in order not to get damaged, and therefore it would be very, very reasonable to know that when you got hurt, the other person would be liable, and that's not a problem that you didn't look where you're going. Beautiful. So what we have done is we've been able to geography, Girsa, read and translate, divide and conquer, crosses. In the crosses of Tosafot is matched in the Gemara, and we've acted out what he would have said, what the Tosafot would have addressed to the Maksh, and how the Maksh would have replied. And now we have to think about premise and shift. Premise means what was Tosafot thinking in his mind to begin with, and what shifted in the answer. Very often, the way we do this is we work backwards. We look what the answer was, and we say, that's not what he is thinking in the beginning. So the answer differentiates between my damage caused to others and damage caused to myself. When it comes to damage caused to others, I have to be super vigilant. When it comes to damage caused to myself, I can be a lot more laissez-faire. Moving backwards, Tosafot in the Havamina, in the kasha, he must have held that just like I have to be conscious about causing others damage, I have to be conscious about getting damaged myself. In other words, what Tosafot's premise was, is like we thought, that if you have to be alert in the public domain when you're walking around, there's two consequences to being alert. Don't cause other damage and don't trip on things. In other words, we understood the alertness as a requirement for pedestrians. And we are exceptionally good at being pedestrians, Tommy. Do you know how long we've been pedestrians for? Over 3,300 years. And do you know where it all began? In the Red Sea. We are the only nation that have become Red Sea pedestrians. Most people get to the Red Sea, and when they see the water, they swim, they snorkel, they surf. We walk. And therefore, as pedestrians, we take the cake. Initially, Tosafot thought pedestrians have to walk, look where they're going. That's what pedestrians do. That's how you behave in the public domain. Looking around. And when you're looking around, well, if something's there, you're going to see it. Two consequences. If you break it, buddy, pay up. If you get hurt, buddy, tough luck. Should have looked where you're going. Shift. One of the beautiful natures of Talmudic thinking, something that we keep on reaffirming, is not the ability to become better at your thinking, but to be able to shift what you thought to what you do think. That constant practice of understanding things through one perspective, shifting, and then shifting, and then shifting, that is the power that drives us forward in understanding of the world around us. Because if we remain always with our old hackneyed ideas that we had when we were younger, and then we just perpetuate them into the future, we remain stagnant and frozen in a world, because our world is a mental structure that we internalize inside of our heads. And if that becomes fixed and rigid, we lose the potential to grow, to understand, and to deepen our wisdom. And therefore, the major skill of intellectual advancement is not becoming quick and fast at thinking. It's becoming capable of thinking in a way that I didn't think the day before. Seeing things through a new perspective, a new light, and a new vantage point. Being able to shift the paradigm, shift the paradigm, shift the paradigm, shift the paradigm. And therefore, Tosafot says, yes, that's the way we would have thought. Intuitively, if you have to be careful as a pedestrian, and we're good at being pedestrians, therefore it has two consequences. You're going to be liable for what you damage, and the person's going to be exempt for damage caused to you. Then Tosafot does the switch. No. There's a deeper, more profound notion which creates nuance and complexity to your pedestrianization in the public domain. Not every pedestrian has to look at the world in the same way. It's almost as if, as the pedestrian traverses the vast expanses of the public domain, he has a double consciousness in his mind. He becomes hyper-focused on making sure that there's nothing within his radar that could be damaged. And as he treads carefully, he makes sure that he causes no one else damage. But if inadvertently he missed something and stumbled and fell and received a wound, an injury, a laceration. The person that was there, responsible for that object which causes damage, he creates and he sustains the liability. And that's a shift. Normal pedestrian behavior to advanced, spiritually aware pedestrianization. It's a whole new world of how to walk in the shuk. You thought walking in the shuk was a walk in the shuk. No. So that's geography, Girsa, regional state, divide and conquer. Crosshairs, premise shift. Substitution. Do we need to read anything back into the Gemara? Not really. The Gemara is explained by Tosafot based on his question, but there's no need to doctor the text in any way. And that, my dear friends, is a classic example of the 7 wonders of Tosafot, even though we haven't fully developed it into the continuity of Tosafot, but this is just a demonstration. This is a model of how to learn as opposed to a in-depth learning of a given sugya. We're just using the sugya as a means whereby to demonstrate and to practice and apply the methodology that we are attempting to inculcate inside of ourselves. Good? Good? The end?
There's an ET right there.